What you're about to see definitely is not fake. Seriously.
What is the fastest music humanly possible? And could we ever hope to play it? Now, I don't necessarily mean what is the fastest a person can play on their instrument, because we already kind of have a metric for that. Tom Grosset holds the world record for single strokes on drums with 1,208 single strokes within a single minute. That's fast, but it's kind of more of an athletic feat, not a musical one. There really isn't any sort of musical context to that. Now, I also don't mean the question, what is the fastest music? There are genres of electronic music, like extratone, which are created by speeding up the tempo within a digital audio workstation to its maximum value and then beyond. I'm actually more concerned with the limits of human musicality. What is the fastest that we can play and hear music? In his paper, Cognitive Constraints of Metric Systems, Justin London adapts Peter Westergaard's table of tempos organized from slowest to fastest. London has translated our familiar beats per minute metric into something called the inter-onset interval. This is the time in between individual rhythmic stimuli, or beats. At the bottom, it lists 240 beats per minute with an inter-onset interval of 250 milliseconds as too fast to be useful. That sounds like a challenge. Let's first check out this. Anne-Sophie Mutter and her Baroque ensemble playing a lightning fast summer from Vivaldi's The Four Seasons. That's very impressive, but the tempo is only 180 beats per minute, closer to very fast versus too fast to be useful. What about this example from Mike Glozier playing a drum transcription of a Venetian snare song Frictional Nevada? This is amazing, but this is only at 200 beats per minute. We still aren't anywhere near close our goal. Death metal drummers can often compete to see how fast they can play blast beats, a kinetic and dizzying stream of notes. An arguable master of the style is George Kollias of the band Nile. This clocks in at an astonishing 250 beats per minute. Finally, a tempo too fast to be useful. Congratulations, everybody. For each one of these performances, the musicians have been subdividing the main pulse into 16th notes. So for every beat, there are 4 smaller sub-beats, each with its own inter-onset interval, a quarter the length of the main pulse. In a paper published in 1894, Thaddeus Bolton found that the fastest inter-onset interval that his test subjects could reliably perceive as groupings of pulses was around 100 milliseconds. This is important because our ability to group pulses together into rhythms is what gives them meaning. Many papers and additional research in the centuries since then suggest that this threshold of 100 milliseconds is the fastest inter-onset interval that we could reliably be expected to hear as a meaningful subdivision. So how does that hold up to scrutiny in the real world? In the case of the Vivaldi, we had a tempo of 180 beats per minute divided into 16th notes. This means that the performers were playing 720 notes per minute, or 12 notes per second, with an inter-onset interval of 83 milliseconds. 83. Take that, Thaddeus Bolton. Mike Glozier was playing with inter-onset intervals of 75 milliseconds, and George Kollias was playing with an astonishing 60 millisecond inter-onset interval. Our initial suspicions are kind of confirmed. If something sounds damn impressive, chances are it's crossed the academically approved threshold of rhythmic perception. In a paper published in the Music Perception Journal, Richard Parncutt distinguishes between pulse sensation and the physiological internal clock. We, the audience, will have a pulse sensation of 16th notes, but it's the performers who will feel an internal pulse of a quarter note, which has a slower inter-onset interval. So how fast can we set our internal clock? There are certainly examples of internal clocks being set way faster than the suggested maximum of 240 beats per minute. Consider this recording of Jim Van Cleef playing Train 45. This recording poses an interesting question. Are the performers setting their internal clocks at 200 beats per minute and then playing 16th note subdivisions, or are they setting their internal clocks to 400 beats per minute and playing 8th note subdivisions? The pulse sensation of the subdivisions is the same with an inter-onset interval of 75 milliseconds. All evidence would suggest that they are feeling it at the faster 400 beats per minute. In bluegrass music, as well as jazz and other styles, there's a heavy emphasis on the backbeats of the measure, or beats 2 and 4, and musicians are trained to organize their thoughts around this rhythmic concept. How can we teach ourselves to feel music this quickly? In bluegrass music, the bass player generally plays the root on the first beat and the fifth on the third beat. If we set the metronome to say 350 beats per minute and play that root fifth bass line, it will sound like this. The problem is our internal clock probably is not set that fast. It's probably set about half as fast here. How can we get it so that we're feeling it at the faster tempo? Well, what we can do is we can set this metronome in our head to beats 2 and 4, and that way our internal clock is responsible for beats 1 and 3 and trying to keep everything in sync, like this. 2, 4, 2, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Physically, this challenge is fairly easy, but psychologically, it's very difficult. It's great for challenging the boundaries of your own perception. All this is great, but I think there's still something missing here. For example, why did all of those studies cite 100 milliseconds as the fastest inter-onset interval, when all of the music that we've been checking out so far has been significantly faster than that? Well, in the study of perception, there's something called the Weber fraction, which basically measures how much something needs to change in order for you to notice that it changed. What one study found was a massive increase in the Weber fraction for inter-onset intervals faster than 100 milliseconds. Basically, in speeds faster than 100 milliseconds, it's harder for us to tell if different things are faster or slower. Things start to sound like a blur of notes rather than any sort of discernible rhythm. The fraction goes higher and higher the faster we go. We're just unable to perceive differences in speed. It's especially high around 50 milliseconds, which is important because that is the threshold of human pitch perception. You see, an inter-onset interval of 50 milliseconds can be translated into 20 hertz, or 20 cycles per second. Pitch is measured in hertz, and 20 hertz is the lowest that humans can hear. So, when a stream of notes have an inter-onset interval of 50 milliseconds or faster, we don't perceive it as rhythm anymore. We hear it as one continuous note with pitch. So let's recreate that study. I have here what they called a click train, which is basically a bunch of clicks set to an inter-onset interval of about 100 milliseconds. You can see here at the bottom, that's basically what this is. And you can hear it kind of as a rhythm. Once you get closer to 50 milliseconds, if an inter-onset interval is of 50 milliseconds, it's trickier to hear it as a rhythm. It just kind of sounds like this low throbbing hum. All right, we're at 50 milliseconds right now. Almost has a pitch, right? Now when I speed it up a lot more, you can hear the pitch, but when it's down closer to 50 milliseconds, it's a lot trickier to hear. Humans are really bad at figuring out what's going on in this gray area of 50 milliseconds. We just don't know what we're hearing. Is it rhythmic? Does it have a pitch? I don't know. This threshold with inter-onset intervals of about 50 milliseconds seems to be likely where the fastest music humanly possible can go. This is how fast we can hear rhythm before it metamorphosizes into pitch. It's interesting to note that this is a perceptual ceiling, not an athletic one. We conceivably could play faster than this. We can see this because there are plenty of videos out there of guitarists playing definitely not faked videos, playing 16th notes at like 600 beats per minute or 1000 beats per minute or 1600 beats. At a certain point though, the structure of our brain doesn't allow us to hear things as rhythmically related. Things begin to blur together and change into a different sort of understanding of the sound. Now, even though they're not quite at that threshold of 50 milliseconds, I think there's something quite special about all of these performances beyond their obvious virtuosity. This temporal range of subdivisions, faster than an inter-onset interval of 100 milliseconds, gives way to a special kind of aesthetic that literally pushes the boundaries of human perception. When done with an aesthetic goal in mind, extreme speeds in music can be quite sublime and maybe even transcendent. Maybe it's the feeling that we don't quite understand how fast things are going that gives way to this kind of excitement. Musicians sensitive to this feeling, and also with the virtuosity in order to execute it, can exploit it. With that in mind, I leave you with an excerpt of Max Roach's band performing Freedom Day with Abbey Lincoln. Recorded in 1964, the band gracefully pushes the limits of human musical perception at 420 beats per minute. I hope you enjoy.
Conceive it, don't believe it, but that's what they say. They've no longer, slave no longer. This is Freedom Day. Freedom Day. It's Freedom Day. Throw those shackling chains away. Everybody that we see says it's really true. We're free.
So thank you so much for watching. My name is Adam Neely. I have a new video coming out every Monday, so if you like what you saw, please comment, please like, and please subscribe. I found this video really interesting to research because I found some interesting things about that 100 millisecond sort of threshold, kind of relating to the alpha brainwave and entrainment into the alpha brainwave. I don't know a whole lot about brainwaves. Actually, to me, before reading this stuff, it seemed kind of new agey, but there's a lot of research out there and definitely stuff that I'm going to be researching for future videos. Please consider clicking the ring button next to the subscribe button because I do release things every Monday, but I also release things throughout the week. So if you want to be notified, you'll get notifications for that sort of thing. And if you really enjoy what I do, please consider joining my Patreon like these people have done below, because it's through their support that I'm able to do these videos week after week. I do Q&A videos also, and I'm very, very grateful to those of you who have supported me on Patreon. So thank you. And until next time.
Bass.